lots of hype, lots of interest, lots of legitimate interest, of course, but a lot for us to think about in terms of how we play in this whole space. So the panel that I brought together for this include Dan Grossman from the University of Washington. Dan is going to be teaching a MOOC course for Coursera next quarter, starting in January, and is in fact sort of coordinating the computer science department, or all of UW, just computer science department?
Coordinating computer science, dealing with the rest of you.
Right, so the computer science department's interactions with Coursera, Dan's handling that. And so he's preparing, and he's well in telling us about what he's up to and why. Have Fred Martin next from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and Fred has been on the other side of things. Fred has taught a course where he used a MOOC as sort of the electronic textbook for the course, if we will, and did other things with his classroom time. And so Fred's going to talk to us about that experience, which is one that seems to me to have a lot of relevance, but you know, it doesn't save all the money that 100,000 people being in a MOOC course might do for some people. And finally, I have Jennifer Dalby here, who's an educational technologist who is incredibly connected in this whole area of online learning. She happens to be a colleague at Seattle University, and so I'm delighted to have her there as well as here. And she will have some insight and lots of links to add for us. We're going to keep the presentations relatively short so that we can make this a conversation. For instance, our cameraman, Charles Severance, is a MOOC instructor himself already, and I presume he's going to get into this. And I intend that we'll be a couple of tables at least at lunch where we will definitely want to carry on more conversations about this. So, as that is the intro, I'll let Dan get started.
All right, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Let's talk about MOOCs. I want to give you a little background, as Rich already started, of how I ended up in this space, tell you why I'm excited to teach a MOOC come January, a little more speaking a little bit more for my department of why a department or maybe even an institution might want to work in this space, and then some thoughts on some other topics. I've purposely kept this very short. I think the more Q&A we have, the better. I'm not speaking for my university. You may have people at your university who don't agree with you on every last detail. That's my experience as well. And you know, I'm new to this space, and I think a lot of us are, and I think that's a lot of the fun. I think this is a very timely topic. Okay, so I'm going to teach a course in January. It's called Programming Languages. I encourage you to sign up. I'm getting 200 to 500 people a day, already up to about 26,000 as of this morning. It's a sophomore level course, essentially. Okay? I'm also leading my department's efforts. This will be one of 2 courses we teach starting in January, and then we'll do another 3 starting kind of early April. And I think we made the very wise choice not to rush and put things up this fall. We're taking some time, and right now I'm working with an amazing group of 5 TAs who are TAing without a course to TA. They are just getting us ready. And that's been a lot of fun, and I think that's a model that's working well for us. We do have other courses at the university I can speak about a little less authoritatively. I'm trying to focus on my department's thing because that's what I know very well and what I'm participating in. And if you wonder the credentials that got me into this, it's just that I was interested and I was in the right place at the right time. I have become a department leader on educational topics. I revised our curriculum and things like that. But mostly, I read the same articles you did, had the same excitement that maybe you have, maybe the same anxiety that you have, and I said, okay, I'm the guy, let's hope we have fun. And so far, it's been fun, with plenty of bouts of anxiety as well. Just a little context. People can mean different things. I never like to argue over definitions, but some things that to me make this space a little different and something fairly well defined. I think there's 4 things that bring it together. The thing that actually got me excited is what's often called semi-synchronous. So if we call a synchronous course the thing where you and the instructor and the other students all need to be doing something at the same time, that's synchronous. Asynchronous is a more self-paced course. I do my stuff as an instructor, you follow it sometime later. Semi-synchronous, the way these things work, is You can watch the videos, participate in the discussion board anytime, day or night, but the course starts at a certain time, ends at a certain time, homeworks are due at certain times. And what that seems to do is create a social cohort, create motivation, create a lot of different things that seems to be a niche in some fundamental way we're figuring out. Okay? The second thing is scale. Believe it or not, if you have 5,000 students in a class, it's easier if instead you have 10,000, or it's easier you have 20,000, because at that point you can't help the students individually. So by having more students, they help each other. You have more students that speak different native languages. They're on the discussion board every time of day or night, and so scale starts helping you. It's a little counterintuitive, but you get used to it. The third thing is obviously it's got to be online. We don't have any classrooms on my campus that hold 25,000 students. And that's going to change the technology and the interaction framework and whatever. And last, it is free. Now, this is a touchy topic. Obviously, people are trying to make money off of this. My university, in fact, is trying to offer enhanced versions for pay. That's not something I've personally focused on, but if we want to get into it in the Q&A, I'll do the best I can. So why am I excited? Why am I doing this? Well, for me as an instructor, the bottom line, let's not ignore the obvious, is I believe that I have a superior course and I want to have impact by sharing it with more people. All right? It's so obvious, I want to make sure it's clear, right? And I'm going to have 10 to 20 to 30 times more students in one term than I've had in the last decade combined. Right? That is a way to have some kind of impact. I also hope to influence other educators. I think you have people sign up for your course who already know the material and just want to see how you're doing it. And there's some advantage in getting in there. I think it is more fun, less work, and more effective than writing a textbook. And I'm going to make that textbook comparison a number of times because I think we often compare to conventional classrooms when we ought to also be comparing against things like writing textbooks. And I'd be lying if I didn't say there was a tiny bit of ego involved that, I want to be the guy doing the programming languages course. I want to be part of change, not keep reading the articles by other people I know and respect doing all the change. And I have various concerns. I'll just focus on the first one. I think I'm a good conventional classroom teacher, maybe even a very good one. And I don't want to be that stage actor who got the big television contract and then isn't any good at it. For my department, the sell was pretty easy. It's again to have impact. I think that's what an academic department always wants to do, and to be able to teach a lot of people from around the world and be seen as leaders in my case, computer science and engineering education has a lot of appeal as an end in itself. I think beyond that, we all have these concerns or fears or excitement that MOOCs might fundamentally change how universities work in N years for some value of N. And we felt that if we don't have people in my department with experience in this space, we won't understand that change that might or might not be coming. I think there's a huge reputation angle. The feedback angle I think is real. I can already tell you from getting ready that my conventional students, who I will also be teaching, will have a better experience than ever because, oh man, am I motivated to make sure there are no typos, bugs, or difficulties in the posted instructions. And they'll have videos and stuff and all that. Are we willing to pay for this? Sure. Largely because it doesn't cost very much. And we can talk about what you actually have to pay for and what you don't. It's remarkably simple. Right, so if these courses are free, why are people going to continue paying tuition, which is somewhat related to my salary? I think there's a lot of reasons. One of the biggest is I think you go to a university intellectually for a coherent 4-year or whatever, 2-year or 5-year curriculum that's put together sensibly for some sort of local or regional or national need among your students. I don't think MOOCs offer that at this time. I think interacting with humans that understand your needs cannot be overlooked. You get homeworks graded by humans. You get to do open-ended design and free response questions. You get to get credit because we actually know who you are and can assess that you learned something, and we can adapt to your needs. This may sound like motherhood and apple pie, but again, these are points we need to emphasize and things where I don't think these massive online courses have caught up, and I don't think they need to for me to be excited. And of course, there are plenty of other reasons to be at the university. And of course, the lecture, if you will, or the classroom experience has been threatened plenty of times before. And if Betamax didn't kill it, maybe this won't either. Rich talked in his introduction about our MOOCs failing because completion rates are, let's say, less than 10%. I'll push back on this. I'll say it's basically because of a false denominator. Right? To sign up for one of these classes, you type your email into a web page. All right, you're not buying into the class. You might sign up for a class you're not qualified for. You might sign up for half a dozen that you're interested in, knowing full well you don't have time to take a half dozen, right? You have jobs and lives and constraints, and suddenly you realize, wow, I thought I had time to take a college level course and I don't. You might just change your mind. You might sign up twice to cheat, all right? I think those are all reasons the denominator is really false. Now, there might be true reasons about that denominator too. The courses are poorly organized, or they work better for certain kinds of students or more experienced students or whatever. And I do not believe, I have not seen anything where people can really study whether it's the top half or the bottom half. But I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't trust the denominator, which means when someone tells you that 25,000 or 100,000 people signed up, don't trust that number either. Remember the numerator, right? Which has more impact, a 95% completion rate out of 200 students or a 3% completion rate out of 50,000 students? Grab your napkin, work out the arithmetic. You'll see how it comes out. Now, there's a counter argument to that, which is that MOOC students are likely, let's say, going to learn less and be less impacted by me than my conventional students. Even if I grant that to you 100%, that's not really my goal. If I compare it to the impact I would have of writing a textbook, I think I will have more impact, just because of the technology and the interaction, the semi-synchronous nature. And I think the comparison is moot. The students that will sign up for my MOOC, frankly, do not have the option, many of them, to take a conventional course with this material in this style. So there are some real concerns that I won't claim to be an expert on, but I thought I would toss these up just before I hand it off to the next person on the panel. I think the financial model for higher education has to be thinking about this very deeply. As I roughly understand it, having never been an administrator, the reason why you teach Psych 101 to 1,000 people is not because you think that's the best way to teach Psych 101, but because it subsidizes smaller senior level courses. And so if you take the big classes away, you have a financial problem. I think there are big certification and assessment issues. I'm not going to try to prevent cheating in my class. I'm going to try to give a good course experience for students who want a good course experience and not worry about the others. I think an education has to have free response and design and iteration and all these things that my class won't have. And then the final thing is this claim that, you know, if the world's best Economics 101 instructor can be found and make the world's best Economics 101 videos, what do the rest of us do? And I think the next panelist will speak a little bit to that. And these are real threats and real concerns that, again, if for the last time I make this textbook analogy, right? When someone makes the world's best Econ 101 textbook, we don't all just go buy it on Amazon and read it and stop taking Econ 101 courses. So I think there's still a lot of opportunity in this space, and I'll pass it on.
I have one slide, and then I'll be talking, but I want to bring up the slide. And where's Jennifer's? Oh, it's a track point. This is always the danger of using someone else's computer. Okay, I'm going to bring up the slide, but I won't talk about it for a moment. Again, my name's Fred Martin. I'm a computer science faculty member at UMass Lowell. I've also been associate dean for a year now. I will make a couple of remarks about like where Dan ended up. So the reason I'm here is because I taught what's become called a flipped classroom a year ago. Actually, this would have started this is the 1-year anniversary of the launch of Sebastian Thrun and Peter Norvig's artificial intelligence course. And what I do have on the screen now is a screenshot from that course. I wanted to start by showing actually what this MOOC is, and before that, just mentioning that MOOC is not a well-defined term. And I think what Dan has in mind for the thing he's building, and what I'm going to be showing right now, is just one thing that could be called a MOOC. And there are some other things that I think no one's talking about, but Jennifer's going to introduce them to us. So I'm going to refer to this as the Stanford model, because I think that this a year ago course was the one where it burst onto the scene. This is the one where 180,000 students signed up. Okay, so here's how it works, and I'm also new to this distance learning, and people have been doing distance learning for many years. But here's my impression of what's new about this versus things like Blackboard, which my school uses, and I never want to build a class in Blackboard, but I would want to build a course in this. So one thing, actually, picking up on Dan, is I really like the point he made of the semi-synchronous. So these classes have a schedule. Things unfold every week. The lectures go online. There's problem sets that are due once a week, and I leverage that in the course where I use this MOOC. And I think Dan's absolutely right. Having structure like that, the semi-synchronous, it really matters. Otherwise, you've got so many things that you could be doing. Why would I sit down and do this now, except that it has to be done because it's due tomorrow? I think that's true for all of us, or most people anyway. So on the left, you see the syllabus as it unfolded. As the units were posted, they became available. You could flip it down. This is about week 4 of the artificial intelligence course. You can see those green check marks. That's when I watch a video. So I took the course alongside my students. The course, it did unfold as the semester proceeded. So you watch the little lecture, it's very small, but introduction, planning under uncertainty, robot tour guides. You watch those lectures. They're a 2 or 3 minute video, and then often there's a little question at the end of the video. One of the cool bits of technology that Sebastian and Peter Norvig developed was that it's a YouTube video, and then the video converts into a place. Oh, a pointer. All right. I'm not used to using these. Oh, you have to hold it down. Okay, well, all right, so it converts. This is the video is ended, and he's asking you a question, and you have to type the number in the box, and then you click done. So then it immediately tells you whether or not you got it right or wrong. If it's during the lecture, regardless of whether you got it right or wrong, probably you want to look at the explanation, particularly if you got it wrong, but usually the explanation is interesting anyway. So you get this really great, so this is way better than an average lecture, right? An average lecture, you're going to drift off, maybe you're not thinking about it properly. So it's really helpful, and when these things are done nicely, they're good questions, and they make you think. And even sometimes they're silly questions, they make you think. Sometimes Thrawn will warn you, this one's really hard, like you have to go off and spend 10 minutes solving a problem, but the answer, and so it's really, and then you get an explanation. So this is great. At the end of it's about an hour and a half of lecture material, so you have to spend an hour and a half going through it at least. Then you're also answering the questions. Then there's problem sets, and they're similar format. 2 or 3 minute introduction, type your answers into the box. So those are not, this is the way it worked a year ago, those are not graded immediately, but your answers are saved. And then the day after the problem set was due, you see if you got them right or wrong. So the way I ran my class, basically, so students started, let me just back up a moment. Students started to ask me about this class in the summer of 2011 when this thing started to get some press. There's great, people are really excited about this. Sebastian is a great showman, got a lot of people interested, there's all this reporting. So students started asking me, hey, I taught AI the previous year, fall of 2010. Can I take this the AI class, and can I take it for credit? So I thought about it as, I'm curious about this, I want to know what it is. So I said yes to a few students, figure I'd do a directed study. Then it became enough students that I realized, well, we could actually have a class here. So I ended up with 16 students, 8 grads, 8 undergrads. At the point where I decided, yes, you're going to get UMass Lowell credit, and they're paying tuition, I have to make sure it's a real class. That's up to my standards. And the way I run the AI class, they do a project. They don't just learn about AI, they actually build something. So I told them, you're going to do Sebastian's course, and in addition, you're going to do a project, and that's the agreement. And then I said, and we're going to meet once a week, because I want to see what you guys are up to, I want us to talk about. So that's what I set up. So I had half the face-to-face time that I normally would for a usual class, but then what I ended up doing was I managed to set it up so that we met the day after the homeworks were due. And it was really cool because I wasn't like the bad professor making you do work. It was Sebastian and Peter Norvig. And if they didn't explain something well, doesn't reflect badly on me. It actually became interesting. Then we had to figure out, well, what are these guys talking about? What's really going on? So when things were going well, the students were they were doing the homeworks before we met. This is the first time these guys launched this thing, and there were a number of weeks where they gave a 1-day or 2-day extension because the servers were crashing. But ideally, the students had finished their work, and we could have a conversation. I had 16 students. We used a seminar, graduate-style table, grad seminar where we sat around a table, and I just had students take turns talking through their solutions for each of the problems. And we ended up having some really good conversations. I was able to act on the side of the students. If I didn't understand something or if they didn't understand something, then somebody else helped out. I've had the fortune, even though we're a state university and money really matters. By the way, I have to say, with respect to Dan having 5 TAs for a couple months, do you know how much money that costs? It's like a couple $100,000.
Well, these are undergrads.
Oh, they're undergrads. Oh, I take that back. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought they were grad students.
$11 an hour. Yeah,
that's cheap. Sorry. When I heard TAs, it's $80,000 a year per TA. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
For you, 10 an hour.
You're not helping me. Well, so I really did lose my train of thought. Well, so all right, let me skip to, I should skip to a close. So the other thing I did that I think was really crucial, and Dan also suggested this in his comments, is that I supervise these projects. And I mean, I think that transforms what is happening. So to put it bluntly, I think if students just took this course, and I'm just going to refer to this one, this particular AI course was really introducing many topics at a surface level. This round of it, fall 2011. Like when I teach the AI class, I do half as many topics at more depth. But this class was definitely, if that's all you did was take this class, you learned about AI. You didn't learn how to do AI. And I think that's a really important thing. The other comment I want to make, and this is something in the rhetoric that we see in the various news stories and some of the leaders in the commercial endeavors. And Dan, you opened this up for me. Dan, you said that one of the things that's powerful about MOOCs is students don't have an option they're available to students who don't have an option to take a conventional class. And so that's true at some level, that people are busy and they fit into your lives differently. But as Rich suggested in his remarks about what sort of students complete MOOCs, I think we're looking at people who are very accomplished learners, who probably, like in the case of the MIT circuits class, 80% of them already took a circuits class. So they're people who are effectively upper division undergrads or college graduates. And a lot of the rhetoric where you find people, there's the NPR story that's linked in our resources that was last week, and they have a kid from Kazakhstan who took the Udacity MOOC the Coursera MOOC on machine learning, and now has a job at Twitter, so that's great. But you know that this kid is from an upper middle class family and went to a great university there in Kazakhstan, because otherwise the kid doesn't walk into a MOOC and have a chance of being able to figure it out. So I hope we have I hope there's more questions for more things to say, but I think the role of us being in the classroom, working individually with students, getting people together face to face. I think the online and face to face, both things have value, but the thing that we can do of personally supervising students, that you can't. I don't think you can do that online. The one other thing I want to say, and Dan, I love the way you described like the writing a textbook versus creating a MOOC and the impact. Like, And you're really honest about like your motivations, which I really appreciate. I think also, if like those of us who enjoy teaching, we really enjoy the face-to-face. We enjoy like seeing the idea light up in your students' eyes when they get it, and it's fun to see students struggling with ideas and know that you can help them by figuring out what are they thinking that I can help like steer in a direction. And there's great, I mean, writing textbooks has the ability to really have an impact. All right, I think I'm rambling now. I'm going to stop. All right, thanks, you guys.
Thanks.
Hello. I don't think there's any better place to unpack this topic than a room full of several hundred problem finders. This is a poll everywhere poll, and I'm going to ask you to do this. If you've got a mobile device, you can use that. And let me open this up. I'm going to ask about your relationship to MOOCs. This is live, and it'll update as you answer. You text a code. The number you're going to dial on your mobile device is 37607, and you text in the number. You don't have to have a smartphone. Any phone that can text can do this. So if you want to do this, we'll get an idea of our experience level with MOOCs in this room. So I'm asking, what is your relationship to MOOCs? I'm cheap, so you can only answer once because I didn't pay for the paid plan. So I'm asking if you taught one, enrolled in one, completed one, married one, huh? Okay, and I put married one on there because I was talking at University of Washington about a year and a half ago, and I asked the audience, so what do you know about MOOCs? And someone said, isn't that an Italian gangster?
Right.
And I had to pull up the Urban Dictionary, and they were right, so they got a gold star for that one. But I had a lot of explaining to do after that. And so until it became popular, I really didn't want to talk about it in a presentation again. So this is a great opportunity because people are asking me about it now. So this is Poll Everywhere. You can get paid accounts where you can have lots of people participating. You can use it in your class. You can collect the data, analyze it, quiz, whatever. This is the cheap version, so I can actually only get 40 responses anyway, but I set it up for percentages so it looks like I'm getting all kinds of response. So we don't have very many people who completed one.
It's very consistent, isn't it? Right.
I actually have 2 mobile phones, so I could throw this off if I wanted to. But I think what's great, when I'm talking to a room full of problem finders, what I want to talk about is the things that are coming up in the media, what we're seeing, and the debates about this, and the pushback from the academy saying, this isn't real learning, this isn't real teaching. How do you teach these hundreds of thousands of students? What are they getting out of this? They're not going to get a full education. I want to make sure that we're asking the right questions. And it's great that the panelists before me brought up the questions we're asking about completion rates, because I think we're asking the wrong thing. I'd like us to ask, what's making our students stay in those courses? Why are they staying? If we unpack that and we find out that the answer is they're staying for a credential, we're in big trouble because we're heading to new places with credentials. So that's another question I want people to be asking when they walk out of here. Where's my tiny URL? So Rich mentioned the tiny URL that we set up where we're storing all of the links for this, tinyurl.com/FIEMOOC. And this is my Bitly bundle. Bitly is a bookmarking service that's probably going out of business because half the features of it didn't work this week when I was trying to set it up. So I'm not recommending you try it. I'm just saying this is where the bookmarks are for the next week or so. So here's my Poll Everywhere poll. How do you move down on this? All right. If you want to take a look at how popular we're getting in these conversations about MOOCs, you can take a look at Google Trends. I was looking at this yesterday, and I think it's rating a 10, which means it's trending at the top of the trending topics. We've got a slow internet connection, so
No, it wants me to log in.
Now we all know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm not going to log into that, but you can check that out on your own. If you want to check out Google Trends for MOOC, so you can see it's not just your dean telling you you have to go teach a flipped hybrid blended MOOC something to somebody because everybody else is doing it and that's how you're going to get tenure. Look it up and see that other people actually are talking about it. No, because we know you're going to get tenure from your course evaluations, from the students who are actually drinking before the exams. That's how you know they're learning, right? Because they get 100% on that exam that they took drunk. Okay, where did MOOC come from? So I'm talking about this term MOOC. People go, oh, that's an ugly term. Why are we using it? This is Dave Cormier from University of Prince Edward Island. The term came about in 2008 when George Siemens and Stephen Downes were teaching a course called Connectivism and Connected Learning, or Connected Knowledge. Yeah, Connected Knowledge. And they were teaching it as a 4-credit course, and they decided to open it up. So they had their core base of students who were paying for tuition. They opened up the course, started promoting it through their own networks, and suddenly had several thousand students participating. So kind of jokingly, Dave said, well, this is like a massive open online game. Let's call it a MOOC, and that's where it started. Now, unfortunately, at the end of last year, Dave did his annual predictions for the coming year, and that's this 7 Black Swans for Education, and one of the things he put on there was that MIT would start offering MOOCs, and suddenly they did. So you can take a look and see where that background comes from. So here's the difference in that type of MOOC that started this whole concept of MOOC. They call these the connectivist MOOCs. And the purpose of those is to open up the knowledge, share it to a network, get the students participating, creating knowledge together, creating meaning together in kind of an unstructured way in their own spaces with a lot of creation, a lot of individual development, a lot of dividing into their own personal spaces, and different kinds of work than you're seeing in these MOOCs like Coursera and Udacity, where there's a structured sequence of learning events and everybody knows what's happening next. You know what you need to do, you move on to the next, and so on. So you're going to see arguments in blogging spaces. If you read any of the EdTech journals or EdTech blogs, you're going to see people arguing about the CMOOC versus XMOOC. So the CMOOC is a connectivist MOOC. It's kind of a more open philosophy. It works well for people who are already very networked and connected to other instructors. Because what happens in a connectivist MOOC is instead of one teacher and lots of students, you're connecting with other teachers and experts and other people in that space that will come in and talk to your learners. So it distributes a little bit of the teaching load. So instead of distributing it by having pre-recorded things or pre-created content, it's more that you've got other people around the world that are able to jump in and answer student questions. The assessment is very different in this type of MOOC. It's a lot of reflective practice, a lot of reflective blogging. It's more of a you did it or you didn't than an actual deep analysis of the what people actually learned, but it's great for if you want to have people creating. There are lots of examples of those connectivist MOOCs right now. The CCKO8 was the original one, Connectivism and Connected Knowledge. DS106 out of University of Mary Washington, I recommend you take a look at that if you get a chance, because that's actually turned into a community. It originally started as a course there on digital storytelling. So students create a lot of pieces. They create media, they create text-based content, they create images, videos. They also do a lot of curation of existing material online. So when they opened that up, they got several thousand people from external participants who mentored these students and then started creating the work for this course. They eventually got to the point where students were creating the assignments. So they have an assignments database where you can submit a recommended assignment for the course. You can even submit samples of the type of quality work you'd like to see for that assignment, and then they work together to select what assignment they'll complete each week. And there are several colleges participating in that. So they do have credit students. They also have non-credit students participating at the same time. This Ed Startup 101 is a David Wiley course that started, I think, last month, and it's a course designed to help educators learn to think like entrepreneurs. And David Wiley is one of the early pioneers with open education and especially open online courses. So that's somebody to watch in this space. This Rethinking the ET MOOC, this is Alec Koros from University of Regina in Canada. And he's working on developing a MOOC to start next year, but he's not really sure exactly what he wants to do. He's considering both sides of the MOOC story. So can you do this unstructured MOOC where the students are creating the work, they're deciding what we're going to talk about, they're deciding the content. He set up a spreadsheet, asked people if they wanted to volunteer to help with this course. He got several hundred teachers who want to help teach this. These are all people doing it for free. So if you are a networked teacher, you can do this type of thing without the additional expense that you might see, if you try to do this on your own with your colleagues and you're the only one teaching your topic at your school. One of the things that I recommended on his course is that we need to get away from collaborative assignments where everyone's working together to come out with one artifact. I'd like to see these types of courses turn into something more like a GitHub for education, and if you can build me that, please do, because I'd like to see us start with a framework of what a course is, and then have people spin it off and fork it in their own directions, and we can do commits, we can add whatever we want to build this quality course, but if your context is different, you can go off on your own and do what's appropriate for your school. So that's my suggestion for his UnMOOC. And then if you want to participate in one, I noticed several have signed up or done some participation but not completed it. There's one that starts next week, the Current and Future State of Higher Education. It's an open online course. It is being taught by George Siemens, who did the CCKO8 course. It does have some structure to it. The most interesting thing about this one is that this is the first time Desire to Learn, who is a learning platform provider, is attempting to open up their platform and use it in an open way so students can see and access all of the materials without having to have a university account to do that. And they're also integrating that code with Stephen Downes' Grasshopper code, which is kind of an aggregator that he's used with other courses. So it's a real experiment in having a commercial organization work with learning providers to develop not only the course, but the code, the marketing. They've got some Bill and Melinda Gates sponsorship, a lot of other sponsors involved with this. So this will be really experimental. It's about the future of higher education, so you might find some interesting things there about the problems we're looking at. And then I want to talk a little bit about what we're seeing when people start challenging the idea of these MOOCs, like the edX and Udacity and Coursera, and suggesting that this is not real learning or this is not connectivist, that there is something different, that there is a middle ground, that you can do this, you can experiment with it, it's not one set thing. And we do have Charles Severance, who is in front of me right now and willing to talk to people later, I understand, about his data he's been collecting. If you get a chance to click on this blog post, I highly recommend it, because he's collecting the type of information we need to understand about these students. He's asked them where they're from. You can zoom in on his map, and he developed the script to pull this out of his survey and pinpoint the schools where people are, was it where they've graduated or they're currently attending? So it's kind of blended together. So what I did is I zoomed in, I went, okay, are there people from Seattle U in this? I want to know what's going on. You can zoom in on that map and see if there are people from your school that are taking his course. And he's collected a ton of other data. But that's one of the benefits we're all going to get out of this. whomever is teaching will be able to learn more about who these people are who are taking the courses, why they're taking them, what motivates them, and what we can do with this in our own teaching and learning practice. Dr. Chuck is a great example of expanding the MOOC out into the community. Everywhere he goes, he offers open sessions, so it's open office hours. He's traveling, he just posts a tweet, blog post, posts to his community saying, hey, I'm gonna be at this coffee shop at this time. People show up, they get the tutoring, they get to network with each other, they meet other people. He's also participating in the student blog spaces, so students are blogging about the experience. He'll even respond to negative experiences. So a student will say, you know, I dropped out because of this, and he'll go in and say, you know, these are important things for us to consider. I want to know why you're doing this. This will make me a better teacher next time. So I think it's important to recognize that it's not just one set thing, that when we start adding our voice to this type of experience, we can help shape it. And one last thing I want to talk about related to these MOOCs that we're seeing a lot of media coverage on and a lot of questioning is the financial model. What's the business model? There's no business model. And I see a lot of people just dismissing this because they're saying there's no business model. And I'm afraid that we're thinking of this in terms of our academic business. This is a course. We charge people to take a course. We give them a certificate at the end. We might sell them a book. That's it. I'd like to expand our minds so we're thinking of this a little differently, especially when we're talking about these emerging platforms, because there's a lot of opportunity for business that isn't necessarily going to be ours, but could be ours. So for example, if you consider a platform that's got millions of self-qualified consumers, what happens if they open the API? What happens when you've suddenly got all your location-based services linked to this, and you can check in and say, I'm here, ooh, 6 students in my class are here, let's get together. What happens if you discover that you're near Seattle U, and there's a course happening at Seattle U that's a tutoring course to support this MOOC? What if you just want to use this platform, but you can't stay on the user interface? And some student at another school who's actually taking one of your courses has created a better UI or an app or an experience that works more for you. What if somebody's developing a media player that works better for this? What if you're incorporating it into your own online classes? What if instead of just looking at an existing course, you can pull components of it into your course and pick and choose the ones that you want? So I'd like us to think a little bit broader about this. We also have, in addition to if they open up the APIs, which I have no inside information on this, I'm just saying if I were there, I'd be making a lot of money. Recommendation engines. Every day, I am just waiting for Amazon to flip the switch and be Amazon U. It's the perfect learning platform. I don't know why they don't just say Amazon U. This is a course. It's really a book or a toy or something, but we know that anything can be a learning object, right? You've got a bunch of people rating it and ranking it and deciding what's best, and things float to the top. You've got a recommendation engine that follows your patterns and knows what you're doing and knows what you're interested in. There's no reason that these types of courses can't do the same thing. And there's opportunity for us in there. I mean, if I'm taking a course and I suddenly get a message saying, hey, Jen, congratulations on that 85 on that test. Did you know that 15 people who got an 85 on that test just got accepted into University of Washington? Here's how you can enroll. Okay? So, hey, Jennifer, you really sucked on that last test, but these guys got together on Thursday night at this coffee shop and got a 10% discount, and they aced the next one. Why don't you hook up with them? So I think there is a lot of opportunity there. I think we're going to have to be creative because it doesn't match the business models we're used to, but it matches someone's business models, and we can have a piece of that. So I just want to conclude by saying, open your minds. This is the group of people that I think can go back and impact what's going on at our institutions. We need teaching innovation incubators on every campus, and we need to connect those together. We need to be talking to each other and sharing what we're doing. Thank you.
So I think we all have a lot to think about so far, and I know Hope want to talk about. We don't have microphones in the room, so when people want to talk, you're going to have to stand up and talk loud, or walk to the front some if need, if you're all the way in the back. I want to kick things off by asking Fred a question I asked him on the phone when we were setting up this arrangement. And that question is, Fred, so what do your colleagues think? Did you teach a course, or did you like slough off and use all this stuff from the internet?
Oh, right. Well, so it wasn't any less work for me because I had to take the class too, and so that takes time. And then, you know, then there's stuff that I've only taught AIs like once before that, so there was stuff I literally didn't know and had to learn, so that takes time. So, and I thought so the quick answer is I taught it as an overload. So I couldn't get criticized. But actually, a stronger answer is my university really is interested in these cost-saving types of things. So having it be classified as a blended learning experience would be, I mean, it's already approved at the provost level. They'd be happy to have people, and we're expanding and we're literally running out of classroom space. So if I say, it's going to be a great class. They're going to watch an hour and a half of lectures that are interactive and good, and then they see me in the classroom for an hour and a half. That's no problem at all. It's like, yes, please do that.
There is an elephant in the room that you haven't addressed, which is how to scale up the grading in courses. It's not a coincidence that both of you are in the CS department. But in courses like what I teach, which is signals and systems, where there is a lot of proofs, a lot of freestyle answering, there is no known method that we're aware of to do automated grading. People have experimented with peer grading, but this is the main barrier to entry for me in my class. In CS, the technology for auto grading, you know, computer code and all that is fairly mature. But even in CS, there are courses where you can't do that. So what do you see as gateways to break through this barrier?
Sure. It's a great question, and I can tell you as I ramp up, I think more about the grading aspects than anything else, right? I think that's the thing you figure out the furthest in advance. And you know, you have to auto grade. I'm going to be experimenting with peer assessment as well, but that needs to be very simple, kind of a 1 to 5 sort of thing. Believe it or not, you know, computer programming is maybe a little bit ahead because our input is so structured. But you know, we don't just want to run a bunch of test cases and say, okay, if it works on 7 test cases, this is excellent work. So we're perhaps not as far ahead as you might think. I think we will get to a point, I can't say we're there today, where things like proofs and derivations and signal diagrams, whatever, can be auto-graded, particularly if they're input in a certain way. I don't think the MOOC platforms out there are providing enough infrastructure for you today to just jump in and teach the class like you always have. One other just food for thought thing is that you can be creative in how you do auto grading. One of the classes we're going to offer next spring is a computational neuroscience course. I was meeting with those instructors, and they really like students to generate plots. And it's an advanced course, so they don't want to say you have to use Python or you have to use MATLAB or you have to write it in a certain way. They would traditionally say, turn in your plot and we'll look at it. Well, they don't have the technology to automatically look at a graph, but they thought, well, we could ask easy to auto-grade questions about the student's graph. Okay, you've generated this graph. You know, what's the third peak from the left and why is it there? And that has to be a numeric answer, you know, where is it? You know, if you change this input parameter, how much does the curve go down? These are things that you can now auto-grade. So a little bit of creativity can get you up off the ground.
I want to comment on one limitation on the auto-grading, even in CS. I'm one of the people who enrolled in the course and hasn't finished it on the chart that Jen put up there. So if you, even in a simple computer program, if the answer is you got it wrong, that's like not real helpful to the student. right? So, I mean, there's the assessment side of grading, but most of what we do when we have people write programs is have them learn about writing programs. So it's not that different than writing a proof. So saying, no, that's a lousy proof, well, that's actually about the same as saying, no, that's a program that didn't get the right answer, right? But it really is, even for the formative type stuff, the auto grading doesn't work for anything other than what you can ultimately reduce to the fairly simple question. And so that's a challenge for all of us for this to scale.
Can I add another point? So I think you're absolutely right that the auto grading is hard. I want to tell the story that I heard from Andrew Ng, who's the co-founder with Daphne Koller of Coursera, and Dan probably knows the story. So in the machine learning class that Andrew created and ran, there was one particular problem where it was basically a math problem and you had to come up with a numerical answer. And they noticed, you know, there's, let's say, 10,000 students taking the class. There's 200 students getting the same wrong answer. So something's going on. And so Andrew made the comment that, well, if it were his regular class, that would be 2 students, so you wouldn't even notice it. But when there's 200, you notice. And then they looked at the problem, looked at the answers, and realized the students had transposed a couple lines in the implementation solution that led to that wrong answer. So they're able to then build into the system a prompt that if you got that wrong answer, hey, here's something to look at. And then the story's not over yet. Then the other thing they're doing, and Dan also mentioned this, in the Coursera platform, there's a lot of discussion threads. They're tracking everything. And one of the cool things about these systems is they keep track of all your work. You have an account, your work's there. So they also keep track of your footprints, where you went, what you looked at. So the other thing they noticed is students get a wrong answer, and then you could try again, and they're looking at various blog posts, and they noticed that after students looked at this particular blog posting, they then had the right answer. So without even figuring out why, they could just promote that blog posting for people who are getting this wrong answer. Hey, you might want to look at that.
Let's try right here.
So I have 2 questions that are related to one another. So one is that we're always thinking about broadening participation in our fields. And so in terms of the demographic, or do you know if there's anyone who's studying the demographic, not just geographically, but ethnically, socioeconomically, are we capturing a demographic of students that we don't normally capture? And that would be important in terms of broadening participation to fields. And then a related question, since so many people are already educated and have already taken a college course potentially in the field that they're taking this MOOC in, is there a way to retrain individuals that are in one field and also broaden participation in that way? So, you know, maybe they're taking a course in something that they want to gain more expertise so they can enter into that field, and is there a way to harness that? So do you know if there's anybody, I guess this question is more to Jennifer, do you know of anyone who's studying that? Is that being done? Is anyone looking at this kind of trend? I know BioCollective, for example, in biology is retraining biologists, because there's kind of a glut of biologists who can't get jobs, into industry and more business-related positions by teaching them business courses and things. So is there a similar thing going on in other fields? And what's the trend?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with, you know, there's not
Jen,
been...
talk about the question, because people in the back don't
Okay.
hear.
Repeat the question?
Yeah, repeat the question.
Okay, so she's asking a couple of different questions. One, what kind of data is being tracked on who's participating in these things? What are we, you know, we're getting ages and academic background and things like that. Are we getting the socioeconomic? Are we getting, you know, the national origin and all of those types of things? And the second question is, who's using MOOCs for worker retraining? And for the first question, I've seen just through skimming media some examples of that type of capture. I'm not sure how it's going to be released and who's going to own it. I do know that I've seen there's a lot of international participation in some of these courses, because there are some things that are just not being taught in other places. But what we're looking at right now is these types of courses are very much geared towards, you know, the Western culture and Western needs and Western workforce. So, you know, I can even read blog posts from people saying, this is great, but, you know, I'm in France and you're not doing anything that speaks French, and I've got to translate this, and I've got this group of workers who needs to move into something different because we're losing our workforce in this area. So there is a lot of buzz about that. I'm sure the data is being captured. There are some universities who are now starting to assign people to the role of analyzing that and making predictions and making plans for how they can address that. In terms of worker retraining, I've done a lot of work in that area, retraining IT folks into health informatics and things like that. I've not seen examples of people using MOOCs, these particular MOOCs for that, but that does seem like it would be a good use of them, considering most of these people are either in the workforce or they're displaced for some reason. They're not able to physically leave home, or they've been laid off. They don't have the finances available. So I imagine that that might be something that can come forward. I've had experience trying to get employers to accept alternative certification, even from, I worked at Bellevue College, and that's pretty well respected here. Getting people to accept that and recognize even a certification for credit classes that's not something they've used before is really challenging. So I think if alternative credentials are going to go anywhere, it's going to take a lot of effort.
You have something to say on that, Chuck?
A big theme in the course I taught was continuing education, and it's surprising how many people were just walking in with their Coursera certificate and using it for continuing education credit, and getting no resistance whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think probably we'll have professional organizations that'll start accepting that. The medical, legal, teaching, we should have a lot of, it's pretty easy to set up those types of.
Right. So in case people didn't hear it, Chuck was saying that people are having success already using Coursera certificates for continuing education credit. And I'll just add that for my master's program in computer science, where students, we expect a certain level of undergraduate computer science background, and we have other people who want in. We started this fall saying if you got a certificate of completion in one of the Udacity courses in algorithms, we would accept that. Now, this is actually very safe, though, because if they cheated on it, they're going to get creamed in the course that expects them to know that stuff, right? So, if you're trying to do prerequisites for the next step, this is wonderful, but I'm not ready to let them take it online for the graduate course, I guess. In the back there.
Yeah, I have three questions, and I'm sort of interested in the design process. So my first question is, why did you decide to have this conversation as sort of an emulated classroom on steroids? So we've flown all over in order to have a conversation about distributed learning. So why did you decide to do it that way? And I'm not saying you should not, right, but I think it would be interesting to look at why you determined that was necessary or a good thing. The second thing is your design process itself also tends to still be emulating a closed system process, where you've got a closed single designer or small set of designers. And I'm wondering about that and your thoughts about that, as opposed to an open system design process. And the third thing that I wonder about is your assumptions. There's kind of background assumptions about grading in the conversation. So what are your really assumptions about feedback systems in something that is asynchronous or semi-synchronous, self-directed, and the role that grades play as a feedback system as opposed to an assessment system, and how you make those choices? So I have those three.
So I think the last one is sort of separate about grades as feedback, and I'm going to let Dan have that one. But since I was the primary designer of this session, well, it's a classroom on steroids because I had 400 or 500 people who were going to be in a room this morning, and I knew that this was a relevant topic. Now, I would be more than happy to use what Jen has created with the bundle as a starting point for a more extended conversation about this, right? And if people would like us to do that, to make this a community that, or give us some way to connect and continue on with that, I'm pretty sure we can arrange that, okay? And I'd be happy to do that. I think so my impression of working in groups online is that we are more likely to have success with that by having started all together in this room and had this shared experience than if instead of this I had just gotten up and said, we're going to start this thing next week talking about MOOCs, and you can all sign up and play there, right? That the lack of shared experience would be an issue. And so that, yeah, I'll take that as a suggestion rather that we keep this going. Okay? So Dan, let's talk about the grades part.
Well, I'll get to the grades, but I was more interested by the second question, which is closed versus open design of the course. And I'm sure I'm wading into old controversies of which I have very little background in, but I don't want to apologize, if you will, for a closed design, right? Wikipedia is open, most novels are written closed, and I'm developing a course much more in the latter model, and I think a community will develop around it, and I think that that has real value. Particularly in these sort of early days, if you will. And that I don't want to cut off any more open things like you were hinting at and Jen was discussing, but my intention is to, like a novelist, if you will, put together a course and make it available to people and hope that a learning community develops around it. And then grades as feedback, I don't know that I have too much to add over what we heard from Fred. That the scale actually provides new opportunities for educators to understand more about mistakes that are being made and pathways to correcting those mistakes, just because of the enormous scale and the ability to collect everything, which was really the anecdote, the takeaway from the anecdote. And beyond that, I think it'll be very hit or miss. That we'll be struggling to collect 7 or 8 homework assignments and get them graded in a reasonable way without crashing our scripts. And if we can do that, we'll declare success and then try to improve from there.
One thing I found very interesting about Greg's experience was I think I heard that you were getting better interaction with your students in that format.
Yes.
And you were doing it in less time. I'm curious from all of you, if you wanted to take that down to the freshman or the sophomore level, what would you do differently?
Well, let me just repeat the question because I don't know if other people heard. He said that he heard me saying that I was getting better interactions with my students and with less time, and I said yes. I think then the end of his question is, what about how would you do that for freshmen and sophomores? My students were upper division undergrads and grad students, so they already were good learners. They already had made it that far in the program. They were strong students. And I had a small number of them, which makes things easier. I think it's definitely possible to have active learning and conversations in larger classrooms. I don't have a lot of experience doing that personally, but I understand that people can get good at it and it works. I'm nervous about working with lower division freshmen, sophomores, particularly in a context such as mine, where in general, students at a place like my school, many of them haven't yet figured out how to be good students. That's why they're not going to the elite schools, that plus their family income. Crossing those two together, then you go to a state university. And a lot of them will become great students. Some of them already are, a lot of them aren't. And from what I understand about blended learning and online learning, for those who haven't figured it out yet, I don't know if that's easy to make it work. I don't know if others have thoughts.
I would say that it's not necessarily the younger age or the novice college learner, because my experience, I've worked at public and private university and community and technical colleges, and there's just a big difference in the types of learners. Where I am now at Seattle University, a lot of those freshmen come in and they want a massive syllabus that tells them exactly what they need to do to get an A, and they want to be handheld step by step. When I work at the community and technical college, where it's open enrollment and they all come in at completely different levels, that's a different story. But I do think that all of our learners that are entering the formal learning space need some support in terms of metacognition, being able to recognize their own learning, and also in giving feedback to others, because that's critical to building community and relationships in online learning. And being able to give and receive feedback is something that's lacking in a lot of these spaces. So if we can give support around that, I think that we can, get to those learners that you might not expect to be successful in that.
So I'm Alan Spill from the National Science Foundation. I'd like to thank Jennifer for bringing up the issue of credentialing, since I think that is really the frontier area in MOOCs and massively open online learning. And I'd like to make a shameless plug for the Research and Engineering Education Program, because I have a track on research and credentialing right now to try to explore this area. A pocket full of business cards if you'd like to talk to me after the meeting.
Sure, you're a popular guy. Thanks. Further back there.
Yeah, I really like Fred's idea of making this as a kind of a helper course with individual teachers, so that you're actually doing a little bit more closely. And I understand the semi-synchronous, the need for semi-synchronicity in that case. But I take great issue with you that semi-synchronous is the way you have to go. I think that maybe you could have almost all of these courses could have an option where you pick. Do you want me to kick your butt and make sure that you do this by a certain date, or do you want to have a more extended period? Because I was one of the people who texted, yeah, I've done this, but I haven't finished it yet. And I fully intend to. It's the middle of semester right now. I would much rather put it off until the summer when I can do it. So I think there's advantages to days synchronous.
I agree, and so let me clarify that I think semi-synchronous, although I'm sure it probably goes back to the ancient Greeks, is, on some level the new kid in town. That's the new thing that's being added, and there's a lot of online technologies and scale and cloud that made that kind of work now. We've had self-paced online education for a long time, and I think it fits a real need and works in a lot of situations. I just think that, to me, if I look at, so what's exciting about MOOCs, online ed isn't new. Semi-synchronous is one of the key pieces of the recent excitement.
Can I just follow up? So do you think that the move that you're making, I understand that semi-synchronous means you do it as a community with learning processes together. Is there any reason you couldn't put a switch on it so that it would be, I want to do semi-synchronous, I don't?
No, I can't think of any reason why you couldn't, for the student for whom that works, why you couldn't look at the MOOC I've created, pack it up, and do it in a self-paced way. You lose the discussion board, you lose the interaction. I mean, you lose that. But we all know that about self-paced learning, and I don't think there's anything specific I'm planning to do that truly requires semi-synchronous.
Yeah, I'll point out that you can do that already with the Udacity courses. So they have the semi-synchronous thing. And by the way, I would argue that the only thing, semi-synchronous is not new. Semi-synchronous with community is new. But people have been doing semi-synchronous with videotapes, right, for 25, 30 years. And people would follow along the course. So I think that this is actually an interesting piece, because sometimes I feel that our courses can be a contest of who can do this on time, right? And there is, in fact, learning there. We heard mention of people registering multiple times for some of these courses. They do that so they get to take the exams more than once, right? And the answer may not be that they're doing it twice, but they may be registering 4 times, right? Now, if you think of the grade as simply an assessment of something, we're going to put a label on you, then that sounds like cheating. But in fact, if you, by taking the exam 4 times, you're finally figuring out what it is you were supposed to know to get by this point in the course, maybe that's not cheating. Maybe that's success, right? And maybe we shouldn't make you register 4 times to do that. And so there are ways to think about it differently to get at those kinds of things. Got another one in the back there, Larry. Yeah.
Yes, and I have several concerns. I see something up there that says the true history of the vote. I hope that goes back to 1969 when these sorts of things actually started happening. And if you're not familiar with something called the Sloan Corporation or the Sloan Foundation and their annual conference on online learning, you should be. But my big concern here is the phrase I heard that it's going to be cheaper and easier. It's not. In order to do these courses right, it's going to take a lot of investment by your university. Now, Sebastian and his crew and Dave Evans have done something with their own funding. Salman Khan did something with his funding with a little help from Bill Gates. Now Coursera is expanding to all of our universities, and we're being asked to prepare courses. Why? What are we going to get out of it? It's clear what Coursera is going to get out of it. But to develop one of these courses, I heard a phrase on NPR, it'll take the university $50,000 and a small portion of that will go to the faculty member? Not if you do it right. If you do it right, it costs about $100,000 per course, and the faculty member ought to be paid for that. And I'm from Mr. Jefferson's University, and I believe in Mr. Jefferson's philosophy, which is, if Coursera is going to get $100,000 or 100,000 students enrolled in the course, there ought to be some compensation based on the work the faculty member has to do to make that happen. And I don't see how that's going to come out of this. There are models. Other universities have been doing this thing for years. Burns Oakley in the 80s and 90s was talking about the University of Illinois Online, 50,000 students at a time. But they paid for it. That money went back into course development, and that money went back into helping pay the faculty members and teaching assistants and so forth. So I'm really concerned. This whole movement has been around for less than a year, unless you count Self-Econ, which has been around for longer than that. What's the business model? In my university, the business model was we signed up for 5 courses, they were already recorded. Suppose I come to Reed and say, Reed, I want your systems engineering course on. What's Reed's first response supposed to be? What's in it for me? Ego is one, but it takes development costs to make these things happen. And I think the hype is interfering with the history of business learning and what we know. It takes real effort to do these things. Yes, your professors will be better for having done it. But if we get sucked into this model and we think these are really free, we're making a big mistake.
Well, I may have missed something, but since we are discussing here engineering and science education, can you elaborate about laboratories? Have you any experience with laboratories?
Oh, right. So the question is, wait a minute, we're engineers, how do you move the labs online? And I am a computer scientist, and so the answer is no, I haven't thought about that. Except the obvious, that, I mean, if you want to make something smell or blow up or, fire a spring, that's something we do in the physical world. I mean, I can push back, right? I can say, we teach pilots and flight simulators now. We don't need airplanes. And so we'll continue to move that idea into more and more spaces as online increases its capabilities. But I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we don't need lab space and lab time, because I don't believe that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good answer, Dan. Have people seen the MIT EDX circuits class? And Rich, you mentioned that. Yeah, that one has this really cool circuit simulation lab built in. I'm an MIT alum. I wish I had that when I took that class. I probably would have learned a lot more. So, I think simulation is a big part of the answer. Obviously, we do. There's Chronicle Virad has, I had set up this joke, but basically they should have a section like Today's News in MOOC, because I don't know how many people read that, but it's like 4 or 5 stories a week. So Today's News in MOOC, they did a little profile, and they talk about a success story of a guy who I think was, works for FedEx and does technology and took the course and did well, and then he went out and bought resistors and capacitors and started building the circuits. So some of those might actually be pretty easy to send kits out to people. That doesn't scale quite the same way that people would have to actually ship stuff, but it could be inexpensive for people who are committed learners.
Yeah. There's also a nice emergence now of maker spaces and hacker spaces for some of those lower end things. Yeah. But if we're talking about corporations getting involved in this and encouraging their employees to participate in this, then maybe we're looking at reducing some of the load we have at the institution on purchasing these big, huge pieces of equipment. And maybe now we can actually have the students in the actual facilities where these things are being engineered, where things are happening. And we've got a lot in the local area of participation with Boeing and with Microsoft and things like that, and people can actually go on site, and we've got a lot of science and technology centers in the community and technology or community and technical college system where they have those sites and they have that sponsorship. And I don't see why there's any reason we can't partner for that side of things. Maybe we are the labs, maybe we are the hands-on. Maybe we say, look, if your people are really going to, if you're going to certify these people in this, if you want to say they really can do this, then bring them down. and we'll work with them, and we'll see how they can do it. We've got changing roles in higher education for what we're going to be doing with faculty anyway. We're stuck in these vertical articulation silos where we're teaching one thing, and it's one instructor for one course and one topic, and we're not talking to each other. We've got the opportunity to start using our talents and skills for what we're good at. Maybe you are the person who works hands-on in the lab. Maybe you're the rock star lecturer that gets recorded for, you know, all of this. But I think there's opportunity for a lot of new things.
So going back to the flight simulator idea, let's remember that high-fidelity flight simulators exist because there's an economic reason for that, right? It's cheaper than flying real airplanes. It's pretty clear that no one university is going to build high-quality lab simulators, but if you scale, then maybe there is a reason to build, and not sure where up the chain it goes. If you can fly airplanes that way and pilots do most of their training on that, we can do a whole lot of undergraduate stuff in simulators, I think. Now, it feels real uncomfortable, right? Because we want them to actually do lab stuff, right? But maybe you can't tell the difference if you do it well enough. But it only takes money, right? It's not. We know it's not free, right? There's another one back. Yeah, back over there.
Credentials were brought up. I just wanted to bring up the fact there are independent organizations, I think Green is one of those, that are looking at independently providing credentials for people to come and say, I learned this at place XYZ, and sort of bringing that together, verifying that, and offering a credential for it. And if we're so used to the education and the credential comes from the same institution, but that doesn't have to be that way, and it's starting actually to branch off from that, because it's always been that you really had to go to this institution to even learn stuff, but now we're sort of getting the education from a lot of different locations. It's possible also to have an independent organization that offers credentials and verifies those with examinations and whatever other methods they use.
Yeah, there's independent organizations. There's also publishers getting into it. And if you're keeping an eye on the articulation agreement space, I don't know if you're familiar with a company called Altius Education, but they're not only developing their own learning platform that's got some really customized, personalized, directed learning and some automatic grading features, but they own, I think it's called Ivy Bridge, which a lot of institutions partner with and agree on articulation between the schools. So you can take one class one place and get credit another place. A lot of people are building consortia around, you know, sharing resources, transferring students from one place to the next. But I think this really gives us an opportunity to question what is the purpose of higher education, what is the mission of our individual institutions, what are we offering that's different from everybody else, and how do we know people are learning? If we're giving out these credentials saying this person learned this, we better be able to prove it, because what's going to happen is we're going to keep seeing these arguments saying, oh, well, he just took this online course and checked off a box and whatever, and they're going to come to our schools and they're going to see that we're doing the exact same thing. We're talking at a room full of 200 people, making them go sit in a proctored room checking off boxes, and they're not going to see a difference. So we're going to have to start proving that what we're doing is different. So I see that as an opportunity, but I think we'll see a lot of movement in that alternative credential space before things settle.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to generalize the point in a different direction, that if you take a MOOC in any of these models, but I'm imagining more the Stanford model, as Fred put it, and you put around it people offering testing and assessment and credentialing, you put around it people offering flipped classroom-like experiences, and you put around it people meeting up to study together in coffee shops, and you put around online, you know, auxiliary exercises, whatever. That's where I keep coming back to, wow, don't we build all those things around our popular textbooks today? And that's why I often push this textbook analogy, because I think everyone and a lot of these clinical higher ed articles are always pushing the conventional classroom, conventional curriculum analogy. And I just like to think through both. I don't think it's quite like either, but sometimes we tend to focus on one and not the other.
Wait, Dan, what's the difference between a textbook and a conventional course? To me, those seem the same.
Oh, I mean, I literally am comparing, so the conventional course that I go and, you know, have been teaching for the last decade versus a book you can buy on Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, do people go in today go into a potential employer with a receipt from Amazon and say, you know, I bought this book and I read it, right? You know, I mean, I really did pay money. You can check my credit card. You know, I mean, it's a very low-end form of credential.
I don't want to sort of throw a negative thing on this, but I also see this in the broader context of the challenges to higher education, cost. I mean, this, and that's part of what you see in Texas and stuff. And coming from a second or third tier kind of institution, I'm not worried about Virginia, I'm not worried about Washington, I'm not worried about Georgia Tech. But I am worried about my school and other schools because I see the big threats being there. All right, if the students at MIT can take the course at MIT and walk around, the economics start looking like it's going to be problematic. And I've seen this. I mean, I'm from Rochester, right? So I saw a large corporation that couldn't deal with the digital feature whose share fell about 50 cents. Okay. And when I started at RIT, they had 88,000 people working in Rochester. So I'm worried. I'm wondering, what do you see as the effect, the economic effect across higher education as a whole?
Well, I think right now what we're seeing in these massive enrollments in these courses is, I'd like to think of them not as a course, but more of a social object. So at this current point, people are signing up for these en masse, and they're socializing around them. They're saying, I signed up for this. Have you taken this? Are you taking this? And they're socializing in their own personal spaces about it, with their families, in their conversations. It's pretty rare to come across somebody who just signed up and doesn't know anyone else who signed up. It's almost like a Woodstock kind of event. It's MOOC stock right now. So I don't even think at this point a lot of it is about the learning. But I think we need to start asking, why are our students coming to our schools? And we're selling them something to get them in the door. I don't know if we're selling them what we're actually giving them. I don't know if we think we're giving them an education and they think they're getting a certificate. I mean, we don't even have the same transactional agreement right there in the first place. So we need to consider from our own instances what's going on there, and then we need to wait for this bigger picture to shake down a little bit and see how that works out. We don't know if anybody's going to accept these credentials. Well, yeah, Google's going to. I mean, they're already hiring people out of this, but how many people are going to get that cushy Google job because they did great in this course? So there's got to be a lot of consideration about the motivation. I want that data. I want to know why these people are taking it, why they keep taking it, because there's nothing in the world that is going to make me do homework for something right now at this point in my life. I'm 40 years old. You can't get me. I'm signing up for all of them. Believe me, I'm looking at them. But there's no way I'm going to do homework for no reason if you can't tell me what I'm going to get out of it. So, I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of that. And unless somebody discovers what you're actually getting out of it, besides a few people who are getting these great jobs, I think it's not necessarily we're at a risk because it's free. And I also, your great point about the financial side of this. If people are looking at this as a cheap solution to a problem, the problem is there is no the problem in higher education. There's a whole lot of problems. A MOOC is not the solution because it's cheap or it's free or whatever. It's a lot more complex than that.
Okay, I think you want to say something? All right, so I think we've exhausted our time, and we certainly haven't exhausted the subject. So I'll work with Jennifer, and we will set up something to enable online continuation of our conversation here.
We need another MOOC about a MOOC.
We have MOOCs about MOOCs. And so thank the panelists here very much.